for you? Because
Sorry,
you told us about the lasagna and all that.
get better. Sorry, continue. We are live.
Folks, yeah, we're live right now, but we're catching up on our weekend. So we had a little bit of mess up on my side. It was my misunderstanding. So I'm going to start straight away. Right hard into the show, of course, we have an awful lot coming up. We're going to speak about the red wall, blue pain, and hidden testes. Yeah, that's exactly what I just said. Hidden testes. Well, look, we'll start off with it was real close for the Reds. Isel Cody, Liverpool, you were living it up, of course, with your other half. I'm sure rubbing it in the worst possible way and sense. How bad was it for Liverpool yesterday?
I think it's compounded by the fact that in any competition, any sports where you have a goalkeeper, if your opposition keeper gets man of the match, that means you had him under enough pressure for his performance to warrant a man of the match award, which is what happened last night for Coutinho. And it basically, I suppose it shows that Liverpool had the attempts or perhaps the opportunities to put that match away and didn't. And I think for Liverpool, you can look at the season and go, look, you were in all the major tournament finals. You have gone away with 2 cups from the season. It's hardly a failure by anyone standing. And I think currently they are showing celebrations underway as the team return to Liverpool. Now, it's not celebrations for victory, but it's an acknowledgement of the season the team have had. And I think a lot of other teams would love to be in their position. But for when you're in the opportunity to have the quadruple at the end of the season, coming away with the double of the lesser of the competitions really is a failure in the eyes of what, let's say, your owners might be looking for. Maybe not your fans, but I think you have to reflect on Liverpool had the ability to beat that team last night and didn't. And I think that will be the difficult thing. And when you hear Mane basically confirming he's leaving, what does that say about the atmosphere in the dressing room post a loss? That's not what you want. To hear a player is instantly going, by the way, I'm gone. And I know we'll get on to it shortly, but I definitely do think that the delay in starting the match contributes. And I think it's more difficult for a team like Liverpool, who are probably being made aware even loosely of what's happening. And given the history their team has had with incidents where there have been fans either injured, killed, or indeed with gates being closed, there's a lot of red flags there that do contribute. And no matter how well they came out and pressed, it's not a good start for any team in a final.
No, I agree. And what Isel is referring to, of course, is the crush and the difficulties that were happening on the way into the ground. Now, I can say I had a friend, a journalist from Moscow, who was over there. He's a Liverpool fan. He went in simply as a fan, had his ticket, proper legal ticket, went in. As he said, that they were pushed into one area. He said they cordoned off the area because, as he asked French people or French police afterwards, he said that they were very concerned about fake tickets and also people who were, jumping over walls. Now, that did happen, and Liverpool fans were involved in that, even, kind of blagging their way in. That's only a small part, but the French had organised it in a way that was not exactly conducive to proper crowd control. A lot of French fans as well, local fans, were jumping over walls. That's what he saw. He did see that Liverpool fans were climbing over fences because they were getting crushed and they were being pushed back down by police, but they were saying we're being crushed, we're trying to get out. So again, memories of Hillsborough very, very fresh in the minds. And to Flint, I mean, Liverpool overall, I mean, as he said, they didn't deserve to win. I mean, they should have been out of sight, even putting aside the delay and so on. This is supposedly the best team in world football, as their fans would have you believe, but they really messed up when it really mattered, didn't it?
Well, it was such an utterly enthralling game. I mean, I have to be honest. It's no secret that I'm not a fan of Liverpool, but as a neutral, to watch that game, Liverpool dominated the game. And as he sort of said, the real story is they did dominate because Courtois was rightfully man of the match. The thing is, it felt to me like they were playing into almost a pre-match, not stereotype, but the narrative that had been built up over this Champions League campaign of, it's the most bizarre situation. Real Madrid now have won 14 European titles, the most decorated side in European history, and they've been playing as the underdog pretty much throughout the knockout stages, or performing well as the underdog. And I think Carlo Ancelotti is the absolute hero of this final. He just exudes this air of calm, and he never seems to get flustered. Against, of all teams, Liverpool were battering them, absolutely all over them in pressure. But up here, that was the one bit that they lacked. Mo Salah had 9 shots. 9 shots. Real Madrid only had 3 or I think it was 4 in total in the entire game. He had more than double of the entire Real Madrid side. I don't know whether it was a lack of character or not. I don't believe it was, but they don't deserve to win. They didn't deserve to win simply because they didn't finish off everything that they created, even though they dominated.
That is a good point to make, and I think that is very, very true. This is 3 finals they've been in. They haven't scored a goal. League Cup, FA Cup, Champions League final, and they haven't scored a goal. So there is something lacking there. Just to give you a rundown, folks, on, for example, this stats overall for this Champions League campaign for all. Isol, do you know who scored the most goals in the Champions League?
I don't. And I'm fairly sure I heard that information somewhere, but cannot recall. So go for it.
Bayern Munich scored 31. Liverpool, second top scorers with 30. Man City, 29. And Real Madrid, 29. Possession, Bayern Munich dominated with 60%. Man City, second on 59. And then Ajax. And then Liverpool, surprisingly, Liverpool. Passing accuracy, Andrew Flint, who do you think were most accurate with knocking the ball around?
Andrew has accurately left the picture.
Okay, Andrew's gone. Okay, well, Isel, you can have a guess. Who do you reckon?
Passing accuracy, I would go with, I was between City and Bayern. I'm going to go with Bayern.
Do you know what? You should have stayed with City, but they were only in second place, 90.2%. Shakhtar Donetsk with 90.5%.
Oh, wow.
Paris, PSG were third. Yeah, it's an interesting one. And Barcelona made the top 6 with 87.8%. And for most tackles made, this was something that really, really, really got to me. Real Madrid, 166 tackles. So, I mean, that's, that is pretty good. Also, then looking at some of the other stats in terms of like the saves, Real Madrid with 61 saves overall. So, I mean, that sort of went back to what Courtois. I mean, Isa, looking at that, is this the end of the road for this team, for Klopp? Will he have to do a rebuild? Because Salah is not getting any younger, even though he's still playing well. Mane is, he's going. Jordan Henderson, no matter what, he is starting to run out of legs as well. They've got a huge amount of depth at goalkeeper, but they need to freshen up, don't they?
Yeah, and I suppose one thing I do like about the fact is the fact that they are rotating. They're trying to get Quivine opportunities, and that's also important. But that's one position. And the reality is, you also have to look, you've like the likes of James Milner. James is only going to give you so much. And while he may be great to bring on in certain circumstances, you also do have to look at their ability to change their tactics is somewhat limited by their players. So in the sense that we saw it time and time again, particularly against the likes of Man City, where they weren't changing their structure. And I think that's something that maybe new players would assist with. But also, I really do think it's a bit of a red flag when the first thing you're hearing after a final loss within hours is that a player has told the dressing room he's leaving. That shouldn't be coming out. And I think to an extent, there's a bit of work done there, because whatever about player ability, there's something wrong with confidence if you don't have that instinct and that ability to bring this home. And I think you have to look at how things ended on the final day of the season, that may have knocked the players, but they should have won last night. As in, they had all the ability to be winning that game. And the fact that they can't is something that you need to question where the issue is there. And I don't know if it's a host of new players. Like Salah is going to be around for another year. He offers a huge amount. Mane's clearly not. And then you have to look at where do you need to strengthen. I think to an extent they've been blessed with coming out of when the season when Virgil was out for the year, they all had to learn how to kind of, to an extent, muck in at defence. And there hasn't been a strengthening like you see in other teams. They've just managed to play really well as a unit. But a year like this, where you come out with 2 out of 4 trophies that you're eligible for, I think there's a lot that needs to go away and discuss where they go from here to get them to that next level. Because Man City are only going to get better, in my opinion. I don't think Man City are going to take a decline.
That is very, very true. And you look at who they're signing up for next season, with Haaland and so on. That's just unbelievable. I have to say, like that Van Dijk yesterday. I mean, I don't think he's come back as strong after his injury as he would have liked, or many people would have thought. Because yesterday he was at fault for that goal. He actually was. It was very strange. He did something you'd see when I'd be knocking around in the playground with Tim, where you basically stand there and put your foot back out behind you to stop the ball going past. Very much at fault. And I mean, the goal that was chalked off for the offside, which was a strange offside, but by the rule was an offside. That was horrible defending. So I agree with him. I think it's a really, really serious situation for them. Okay, we're going to move on to the next topic. Before we actually speak with Ralph Rangnick, but I want to get Andrew back on for that. This is the Ladyboy Blues. Leinster, of course, lost yesterday in the European Champions Cup final, but they lost to a team led by an Irishman and a team who did so well last year. I actually, on Friday night, tipped to win on Capital Sports 3.0 because I thought that, I just thought La Rochelle, it was their time. Were you surprised by that win, and how well was it taken in Munster?
I have very strong views on the win, for a few reasons. I would start by saying last year everyone looked at La Rochelle and kind of were like, okay, Ronan O'Gara, who obviously is a very famous ex-Munster and Ireland out half, is in charge there. And last year he had John O'Gibbs. So John O'Gibbs would have been the top man, with Ronan coming in as number 2 in the coaching setup, director of rugby and coach respectively. This year, it was a real opportunity for Rog to go in as a complete underdog compared with Leinster. Like the bookies had basically said, like, La Rochelle would be better off not even bothering to turn up because it was going to be a procession. He turned up with the right tactics, the right approach. Now, obviously, the temperatures in Marseille might have been something that La Rochelle were more familiar with, but they also have heavy players who are not necessarily designed for endurance work despite their profession. They also have a kicker who's notoriously unreliable in terms of his kicking ability. His game management is very good, but everything was in Leinster's favour. Leinster have a team that so many of their players are international players, but not only that, they're considered in the best in the world in various positions. The win is absolutely huge for Rog in terms of his ability as a coach to marshal that, but also the last 10 minutes. And I had the benefit of my father taking out his recording of it today and playing back the last 10 minutes for me, telling me that we could fast forward through it, but then proceeding to take the remote so we had to watch it. The last 10 minutes, La Rochelle were camped on the Leinster line. Like, they did not move back. And that level of intensity down to the final whistle, really, it was an exceptionally well coached team. And I know earlier we were discussing this at home, and Brian had commented that Rog's post-match interview was so gracious because he was that manager last year, that coach last year, who lost. He knows what it's like, and it's not a reflection. With rugby, if you get up a good score, if you can keep the pressure on, that's what you want in competition. And put it this way, Leinster are like Man City in terms of they are all-star players. For La Rochelle to win yesterday was great, not only for the game, in terms of to see Rog have such an achievement, but it's great for the game to see other teams coming through and winning, because it felt like it would be a procession, and it wasn't, and that was huge for rugby.
Yeah, it would have been a record-equaling 5th title for Leinster, and I mean, as much as I want, I'm a Leinster fan from Leinster, with a real graw or love for Munster and Connacht. Ulster not so much, but still I like them and wanted to do well. But at the same time, yesterday I really admired La Rochelle when they had a chance to kick, which I would have said, especially with Ronan O'Gara being a former number 10 and out half, take the 3 points and let's go again, get the ball and go again and do. No, he said no. We'll.
Yeah.
I thought
you can't trust West to kick. Like, if you'd been
No.
coming down to it.
Well, that's it.
And
Yeah.
that's great to know I think it's also good that to an extent, the last thing you would have wanted is a player, particularly in rugby, like we saw in the international season 2 years ago, we saw an Irish half who also, he's actually English, but he's qualified for Ireland. He took a horrendous kick and basically his international career just took a nosedive. In a Champions Cup final, the last thing you want is a kick to cost you. And it takes a lot of bravery.
At the very end, Liesl, at the very, very end, when you had the conversion to basically, to nail it down, they were already going to win because time was already out. People were nervous. Even though it didn't matter, people were kind of going, God, and I could see La Rochelle fans doing this in the stands. So the one thing I will mention, because I discussed with Andrew on Friday, was Johnny Sexton. Okay, I'm not spring chicken myself, but he's gone very, very grey, very, very quickly. That's down to hair color as well. But also, he still doesn't look himself, even though I think he had a wonderful game. He was very solid. I am genuinely hoping that he calls it a day now, because there was a couple of times when I saw him, there was someone coming to challenge him and he actually stiffened up. And you don't do that to take a tackle, you have to ride with it, but he stiffened up as if he was like I said, like a dog that's gun shy. From gun dog, we got hunting. Then when you shoot the gun, normally a gun dog just goes after what's coming down. But if a dog's like that way, he flinches. It's the same as we know from boxing as well. You see guys when the punch is coming in, they already are reacting to it. That means it needs to go out. Just before I come to Andrew Flint, Liesl, do you think it's time for Johnny to call it a day?
I don't think we're going to be seeing Johnny going anywhere. I really don't. I don't think he's going to. I think his game, he will be managed in a way that probably he dictates as opposed to Leinster. But I think his intention is to be around. And I think until Johnny decides he doesn't want to play, it's not going to be pushed by either the IRFU or Leinster. And I think it's a difficulty just when you reference boxing. Like, there has to come a point. You never want a brave corner, but in boxing, you also don't want a player's career to be determined by the player as opposed to those in the back room. And I think only in the case of where we see serious injuries in rugby, where players are told they have to retire, I think if a player is getting knocks but they're not considered serious enough, a player of Johnny's stature determines what Johnny does. And I did see one thing online today, which I'm going to compliment him on. There was someone commenting that he was back with the mini rugby team today, which is like taking the kids out, which is after like that, fair play. But no, I think Johnny will determine, and I think that's not the right way for sport to be. A player should never be bigger than the setup.
So you think that they should be able to say he has to step back?
At some point, they're going to have to, because, well, I think they should be able to. I don't think they're able to. Sorry, no, I don't think they can. I think Johnny's bigger than the setup.
Just on that, with the back coaching minis, it's something I've seen with the Irish soccer team coming home, and they would go back to their old schools at Gavin Bazuma. They would go back to their schools in Cork as well, the boys going back. Rugby as well. I mean, there is that in Ireland, there's that lovely connection between the community and that, which still hasn't gone away, even though I did discuss today with some of the guys from Moscow Shamrocks, where there's a kind of before in Munster where you knew those guys, you saw them going into the pub or wherever, even when they were winning European Cups. The internationalization of it has sort of moved further away. Andrew, on Friday, just to wrap up with you on this one, on Friday, you said you hoped, for no malice, that La Rochelle would win. You thought it would be great for them to win. And you actually did tip them, in fairness. You did tip them.
Yeah, I mean, any sports fan will say, whether they've been watching the sport for years and years, or whether they're relatively new to it, if you see a hegemony of the sport where one side is dominating and it becomes a little bit repetitive, I'm not saying it's repetitive for Leinster to win, but simply just new challenges to give you a sense of interest of unexpected endings to the season for new side. Now, La Rochelle, where they will go from here, I mean, Rog is he's the star man at the moment. He's very much in demand, and what I like about his coaching career is that he's not just simply walked straight into coaching Munster, which I suppose some people may have assumed so. He's studied hard. He's shown a willingness to broaden and develop his coaching horizons. Now, whether that means he's more likely to go for yet another, I'm not saying La Rochelle is completely left field, but go for it, perhaps coaching internationally. Who knows? I don't know. I think it's good for any sport when a relatively unexpected side wins. So I mean, it's a good win.
Yeah, I'm so with you on that, Andrew. That well said. And again, it was great. And I mentioned on Friday night, it's great to see two Irish coaches facing off against each other. That is so unusual, and I think it's great for just as an Irish person with my green shirt on. I think it's great. Putting the red shirt back on, Andrew Flint, today, Ralph Rangnick said that he is leaving his consultancy role. Now, he said, of course, as late as the 29th of April, that while he goes to coach Austria, which is a very, very strange thing to do, a great money-making thing for him, but a very strange thing for him to do as well. While he's going to Austria, he was going to stay on as the consultant to manage his company, Rangnick Cornetka Consulting Company, contract with Manchester United, but he said he's leaving because he can't do both to the highest degree. Is he really leaving, Andrew? Well, Andrew, I think Andrew's leaving, so he'll come back in a moment. He is there. I can see him in the studio. Isol, I mean, this was coming for a while, but it's a very strange, isn't it?
It was a very strange setup to begin with. Like, one thing United should have learnt from the absolute hames that was Alex Ferguson basically breathing down Moyes' neck when he came in is that you can't, if you want a manager to come in, take over a team and change how they're playing, which is obviously what they intend with Ten Hag. They don't want him to come in and be Ralph number 2. They wanted a change in what they were doing, and yet you're going to have the previous manager involved in picking players. This is a man who had to deal with the team he had on the ground. It's not, as an idea, everything about it, it wasn't a succession plan. It was having someone there that's determining how a new manager starts a career. It was all very bizarre. In terms of how he was actually proposing to take on the Austrian job and do that anyway, equally bizarre. But I would wonder if the timing of this announcement comes more so in the wake of what was an abysmal end to the season. And I don't think they could have imagined the last day going much worse. So whether that's a big contributing factor. But it was a strange idea to begin with. And I don't know if fans would have been staying around in numbers, and we weren't going to see it moving to back when Arsenal fans decided to turn on trying to get rid of managers. I wonder, would we have seen fan protests, more of what we saw with Man United actually some time ago?
Yep.
Sure. Like, you're hamstring manager.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for me, I still, Manchester United had it before when they had, Matt Busby was hanging around when new managers came in back into the 70s. And then, of course, Alex Ferguson did the same thing. He anointed David Moyes and then just stuck around with a bad smell in the best possible sense. But I still wonder what Rangnick is going to do, because his company still has a contract with Manchester United. He was never employed by United. He was employed by his company, who were engaged, signed up, and there's a lot of money at stake. So if Man United paid him off, that will be very, very soon made clear. Going to Austria, as everybody knows from the great old Otto Barrich, it's a great way to make more money, because now he has to say over who plays for Austria, who to get sold on to, and his company still have the contract here with Lokomotiv Moscow and with Manchester United. So I mean, it's a really, really bizarre situation, and I agree. I think it has to be good for United that he's not there. But if he's there or not there, we still won't know, because United have been very, very strange with the whole situation. They haven't been upfront and saying what he's in control of. He was in control of hiring a new manager, so he got paid for that. He was playing games in terms of that Ten Hag was like, oh, he's now wanted by Red Bull Leipzig, which was a complete lie, but he planted it. And all of a sudden, United, instead of hardballing on the salary and commitments to Ten Hag, suddenly paid it out. But the person who spoke about that was Mr. Red Bull Ralph. So I don't know. I think he'll still be hanging around, but let's see.
It's also like for a team with owners like the Glazers, I'm sure everything about having to pay someone out would gall them, and you're going to have to buy someone out of a contract. So you would also wonder, maybe not so much with Loco, but is there a conflict of interest if you are involved in multiple clubs that may possibly have an international dimension in terms of players? Like
That's it.
There's just a lot going on in that, and the timing. Yes, maybe it's to try and get people back on side and go, look, we're cutting all ties with Ralph Rangnick, etc. But you have to show that you're actually cutting all ties, and that's
it. That is it. And I mean, one of his things as well that he proposed to United that he would, and he's the same local team Moscow, he would bring in Mateschitz, the owner of Red Bull, with all his billions that he would come in and buy them. The Glaziers are desperately looking to sell the club. They are looking to sell the club. This was going to happen. Okay, we're waiting for Andrew to come back, but before he does, we have our talking points of the week. Isolt, you're going to have to handle these, and I'm going to go through them one by one with you, and they're quite interesting. Trust me, they're interesting. So, first one, Simona Halep, the ex-champion, suffered a panic attack when she lost at the French Open. An awful situation. I mean, it was terrible seeing how it all played out. I mean, she literally collapsed when she was playing the Kunwen Zheng. She was leading the first set well, and then just fell apart in the last two sets. She said that it was down, like her blood pressure and heart rate went through the roof, and she said that it was down to being locked down and due to coronavirus for a year, and said she just didn't feel right. She's coached by the I can't say famous or the notorious Patrick Mouratoglou, the French-based coach. That was a strange one that she, this healthy woman suddenly has like a near heart attack on court.
Yeah, I wonder about the impact on high-profile athletes, and I wonder this across the board, as you just said about lockdowns. You're suddenly back on a big stage, and depending on what tournaments you've played in the last year or so, perhaps the pressure, perhaps a lack of confidence, but it's something like a panic attack is something that can't be faked to that level. And I think it's very distressing to see that happening, obviously, for people, but also you would have to wonder, like, how a coach doesn't know that a player isn't coping. That's your job. Your job as a coach, irrespective, it's every facet to be on top of knowing how your athlete is coping, particularly coming up to the bigger tournaments. And I think perhaps the fact that she's a former champion, she's so high up in the echelons of tennis females of the last decade, that there's a certain level of expectation. And I think we're more generous to the likes of Emma Raducanu, and we kind of say when she doesn't play well, people are willing to accept. There are those who are overly harsh, but willing to go, she's young, she's finding her feet. And perhaps we don't have that same level for more senior players or more established players. But it is very frightening. And you would hope that, similar to Naomi Osaka, if a player is going through any mental health issue, whether it be, Naomi has obviously come out and said what her issues are, but for someone coming out and having a panic attack, it's something that needs to be looked at and coping mechanisms put in place, because being on a big stage like that, to have a panic attack and then have it globally reported on, obviously amplifies everything. But it's frightening to see, I think, because it's something that is similar to someone having a seizure. It's completely out of their control when it reaches a certain level, especially
that. Yeah, no, you're right with that. I mean, it was a strange situation. Of course, as you mentioned, Emma Raducanu, she went out as well in the second round. She lost to Sasha Sasnovich from Belarus. John McEnroe was very, very harsh on that. She said like this is the interference from her parents, as in Raducanu, that she's changed coaches, and from being unable to finish a match at Wimbledon to suddenly forcing through qualifying, winning the US Open, shocking everybody, including us. But with Halep, as you said, something should be put in place. And her coach says that he's guilty, but he didn't elaborate on that. Next up, this is one that I want to discuss with Andrew Flint. Hopefully, he'll come back in for this. We did this in depth. Russia, this came up now since March and all the way through till now, even this past week. Russia leaving Europe to go play in Asia. it seems a big step, Isel, but at the moment there doesn't seem any way back for Russia into European competition, and the push is on from clubs here to actually make that change.
Yeah, I suppose the difficulty is it's a change that, despite what people might think, I don't know how, if that change is made, how easily reversible it will be. And you're entering into a different market. You're entering into, from a financial perspective, you're entering into different TV, different media. Everything changes. So too does, obviously, you may have exposure to different markets, but sponsors, everything will be looked at. Like, if your sponsor has an interest in getting a foothold in the European market, why are they going to be interested in moving into the Asian market, which, while it's similar, it isn't the same. But then again, from the perspective of Russian teams, there isn't another option out there, and we don't know how long it will be before there is another option out there. So if an Asian league is an option, I can understand why teams, sponsors, owners, everyone is looking to try and find a way to have athletes back competing. And obviously they have to look at all options, and financially it's a non-runner to not be competing in international.
That's it. And I mean, the amount of money, of course, they would bring in, say, from Lokomotiv, SKA, Spartak, and Zenit from Europe is huge. But at the same time, they're not bringing anything in. It would be a massive drop to go compete in Asia. But, what some people sort of, I saw some English football journalists or football writers say, they're saying that, oh, it'd be so easy, Russian clubs just walk through it. That's not the case. And I've spoken with a couple of Indian journalists as well, and they said, well, actually, Russian clubs are good, but will players, Hulk, for example, he wouldn't have wanted to go to Zenit if he wasn't going to play in the Champions League, and many other players of that. So that's going to be a bit of a difference. And again, the financial drop is difficult, but now Russia has continued and continues to orient towards the east, has a lot of major deals there. Gazprom is more than welcome in Asia to for sponsorship and so on. So again, Europe's cut off for the moment. Let's see what's happening in the east. Next one up, Colin Kaepernick. He trained with the Las Vegas Raiders. So this is an interesting one. Kaepernick, of course, we discussed before. He was the one who led the protest against the American anthem and so on. For Black Lives Matter, taking a knee for the American anthem. And, well, initially he sat on the bench, then he took a knee. Said he was black, that he was blacklisted in the NFL. The teams wouldn't hire him because of his protests. But at his age and with a decline he was showing even before he sort of was blacklisted, does he have a chance to actually make it, even with a team like the Raiders?
I suppose potentially, and I suppose from the Raiders' perspective, what more can you ask in terms of, it's a great publicity move to have Colin Kaepernick come in and train with them. We also are going through a time where the NFL has serious issues in the background to do with, obviously, their treatment of black coaches. So there's a lot of rehabilitation needed in the NFL on so many fronts. And maybe it's the cynic in me looks at this and says, are you the team that's getting out first and being like, Colin's back training with us? There's a cynical side to me that wonders, because he is at an age where the best years in his career are probably behind him. And then you have to question motivations in doing it. It's great, obviously, for him, because I think from his perspective, irrespective of the role he may play in terms of a long-term role with the Raiders, if in fact they were to sign him, and have him join the team fully. But if he's back with them on any sort of long-term contract, optically it's good for them. For him, I suppose it would show that he had reached a stage where he was no longer going to be the player that was blacklisted. Because even when people are coming out, even when Nike are running their campaign in support of him, no one's signing up to have him come back into the league. And perhaps that's more a sign of the control, not necessarily that the NFL as an organization has over the sport, a sign of the control the owners have. And the idea of someone standing up to them and standing up to the league as a whole had led to them being blacklisted, irrespective of the fact that probably the mass group of fans, the mass group of external people were in support of what he was doing. And that says more about the power of owners in that sport. And I think when we see, obviously, Brian Flores and everything that's coming out about black coaches in the NFL, this is possibly a really good signal of intent from at least one organization that they're going to stand up and try and show some support. And we can, from his perspective, I think he deserves to be back with the team.
Like, he's 34 years of age. He's going to be, I think, 35 later this year. The one issue, he was a very athletic running back as well. I mean, he was great running with the ball when he was, well, in college and with San Francisco. He took a lot of hits though, and a lot of people were very worried about him. He was picking up injuries, and especially his last season when basically San Francisco 49ers were absolutely terrible. Into 2016. I mean, I think he played or started 11 games. I think he played 12 games, and they were just awful. They were 1-10. So, he wanted, in many ways, he wanted a trade at that time. The San Francisco refused to trade him, and then, he started his protests, and everything went to pieces. One thing, say, if Tom Brady can play until say late middle age, I think anyone can do it as well. Colin Kaepernick is he practices yoga, he takes care of himself as well. I don't think he drinks, I don't think he smokes, so there is that.
The only thing I would say though is he's in a very different position to Tom Brady, which is a relatively protected position. And the one thing I would say is there's no substitute in his position for the ability to train in game-like situations, and it's very difficult when you've been out. Like, you can get yourself, it's why you see so many, particularly actually Irish rugby players, ex-Irish rugby players, you'd occasionally meet them and they look like they're in great nick after playing a very heavy sport for years. But even though they're in great shape, if you put them on a rugby field in the morning, they're not going to do much, in the sense that there is a certain amount of match fitness and training in game-like situations that definitely matters more in his position than Tom Brady's. But I do take your point. Tom Brady is still there. It gives hope to all of us.
Exactly. And look, a different kind of player as well. A different kind of player. He is a passing quarterback, whereas Kaepernick is a running quarterback. And at times he was wonderful. I've seen him playing in college. He was absolutely unbelievable. But anyway, next up, second from last. This is an interesting one. A boxing world champion breaking a TV interviewer's ribs. Now, this is basically where Kambosos, George Kambosos, he is about to fight Devin Haney for I think it's the undisputed lightweight title. And basically, this guy came in to train with him, to basically spar with him. And this guy, Denye, he said, hit me, go on, just hit me like normal, it's okay. This guy, Grant Denye from Australian TV, he hit him and he didn't say he broke his ribs, but this guy Denye, he couldn't breathe and he was panicking, he felt he was going to die. You'd want to be an idiot to take a punch anywhere in your body from a professional fighter.
You'd also want to be an idiot as a professional fighter to decide it was a good idea to punch someone who is not a professional fighter and is a reporter. The whole thing, it reminded me, and I can't for the life of me think, there's a story about a boxer that I listened to very recently, where basically it was something similar. A boxer kept saying, hit me, being asked to hit someone. And he eventually gave in. And I think it was something similar in terms of the injury. I will think of who it is and come back to you on it. But it's also Mike Tyson recently punching someone on a plane. Like, you are a professional athlete whose job is to punch people with the intention of seriously injuring, incapacitating, or knocking someone out. A man who is a journalist is also going to make it sound 100 times worse, but he's not a trained athlete, unless I missed something in the story. Also, Kambosos, that's not the sort of news story you need when you have Devin Haney coming in to fight him. I'm going to give 10 seconds on Devin Haney really quickly. Devin Haney is traveling to Australia and is there currently solo. He does not have his dad, who is primarily his number one in the corner. He doesn't have his dad there because his dad has a 1992 conviction, which means he can't get into Australia. Ben Davison can't travel to Australia. let's just leave that out there. Why poor Ben can't travel, him of friends with the Kinahan Brigade. But this guy is going to fight for a world title. He's already coming in as the underdog because of all of these adverse situations. Obviously, it comes from huge money, which helps. And then you have his opponent, who's the home fighter. Everything should look great for him. And he's going out breaking someone's ribs.
Yeah.
Fearing for his life is a bit of a push when you ask him to punch you. But still.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one time when I was boxing in Germany and did 2 rounds with a journalist, and it was fun. It was genuinely fun. We were working around, and at one point he said, now he's bigger than me. You know, I was 54, 55 kilos at the time. I was fighting 54 kilos. I was preparing for a fight, and he said, "Hit me, just really, like, give me a good punch." And he lifted. He was in good shape. He said, "Go punch me in the stomach." And I was like, no, I shouldn't. And he goes, "Punch me in the stomach." So I punched him, but under his ribs on the side, and severely winded him. And he said, "Why didn't you?" Afterwards, when he got his breath back, he said, "Why didn't you punch me straight in the grill in the stomach?" And I'm going, "Well, I don't punch anybody straight into the stomach because it doesn't work. They have like good, 6-pack. They've got stomach muscles, so you hit them around the side where there's a bit of flesh." But anyway, finally, I think is finally actually second from last. Kylie Minogue is friends with Conor McGregor, and her friends and her fans are expressing. When I saw this, fans expressed concern for Conor McGregor over Kylie Minogue's sponsorship. Apparently, at Cannes Film Festival, they were posing for photos together, and that's Minogue, who of course is of Irish heritage, said that she would be spending some time with Conor McGregor. Who should be more worried, Kylie or Conor? Because as a Kylie fan from probably '88, I'd say he should be more worried.
It's just so bizarre. Like, to be honest, part of me is relieved when I see these bizarre pictures of him with various celebrities, and there was some other famous jeweler he was photographed with at the Cannes Film Festival, because it stops him from going on about actually doing a return to the octagon or to a boxing ring. So I'm much happier if he wants to go behave like that, but it's just so strange. Like, I am going to be disparaging. I was going to say I'm not going to. What in the name of blue blazes would Conor McGregor have to talk about with Kylie Minogue? Like, to be a fly on that wall would be a fly who was throwing themselves at the wall trying to knock themselves out. It would be so bizarre. But I suppose it's the level of celebrity he has that it transcends sport, because I doubt Kylie is she may be a massive UFC fan. I could be doing her a disservice. It's just such a strange combination. Everything about it is strange. I saw the picture on Instagram and I was like, oh, there's Conor McGregor posting a picture of Kylie, because that's the way I viewed it when I saw it. And I was like, no, it's Kylie posting a picture with Conor McGregor. The distinction is important. I love that people are expressing concern, though. It's like there are first world problems, and then there's worrying about Kylie Minogue's image being disturbed by being associated with Conor McGregor.
Now, in fairness, let's be honest with this. Kylie hasn't had a hit really since Locomotion in 1988. Since she's been sort of she's been spinning around and not doing very, very much the last couple of years. So this actually could be a boost for her career and her image.
It could. Was she coming back? Are they doing like a Neighbours, like, final ever episode? Is she going back for that? Her and Jamie Dunn. I could be completely wrong, but that to me is a career highlight for her, and she is clearly on her way back up if that's the case. Again, you also have to look at when you see people that you wouldn't normally associate with one another posting these suddenly BFFs for life pictures. You're like, what is in it for both of them? And there's probably a lot in it for both. It's a good, like, here I am with my celebrity friend. Have you seen this? And how can we mutually make our profiles be on newspapers like the Mirror, the Daily Mail?
That's it. That's it. Because this week I looked at the Daily Mail and there was a lot of interesting stories. And that one really caught my eye. The next one, of course, caught my eye, and it was a very funny one. Andy Carroll. So on his stag do was in bed with 2 women. And this is what I'm sorry. This just seems to be much ado about nothing. It's people they met who were living there, the woman who we met or that took the photo of herself, he's passed out unconscious, drunk. And the girl, it was so funny. She, this Taylor Jane Wilkie, she's 27 years of age. She said that nothing sexual happened. Well, I mean, he was unconscious, drunk. But she actually, a couple of years ago, had run away from England. She was about to get married and then ran away to Dubai. And she's living there, working away in Dubai. This is a strange one. And I mean, why is this even noteworthy? And of course, his fiance said, sure, I believe him. He wasn't doing anything.
So his fiance would be kind of well known in her own right in the UK because she was on Towie. The Only Way.
The Only Way is Essex. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
He would have built up a profile from this. And I suppose, like, it's such a bizarre thing, but then it has shades of the Wayne Rooney incident last year, was it? He was photographed in a hotel room after a derby game with...
That's right, when he was like drunk.
I have two big issues with this. I do actually have a big issue with it. The first one is he an absolute moron, firstly? The second issue I have is it's such an amazing invasion of privacy. Like, if that was the other way around and a man took a photo of a sleeping woman, can you imagine? No one would be going, this is a great laugh, or questioning anything to do with what had happened because he's a footballer. They would be going, this is incredibly creepy. And I felt the same way at the Wayne Rooney. It's exploitative. You cannot do things like that. Okay. Like,
I never thought of that. Yeah, I never thought of it like that. That's actually a really good way to look at it.
People look at things we have a very blinkered view when we look at things and we see a woman doing something as opposed to a man. And I just think, like, his partner, obviously they have children together. I think it's something you don't need to be saying, oh, I did it as a joke. Well, if you did something as a joke, maybe it went to your friend group. How did it end up on the cover of a national newspaper? I don't know what friend group like, but mine generally don't end up on national newspapers. And like a few nights ago, we came back from dinner and I fell asleep on a sofa, and Brian sent a very funny photo of me asleep on the sofa, practically chewing on a cushion, to my brother. It was a great, attractive photo that will not be going on my Instagram. But the whole point was, that was a joke. And it was one where I was shown the photo, told it had gotten to my brother, and there was a running joke. Taking a photo of someone without their permission, when they're asleep, when you don't know each other, and that person is intoxicated. If it was a woman, think about if it was a woman.
Was it today or yesterday? I was watching I'm a fan of his, Ryan Long. He's a Canadian comedian. Very good performance, and he was doing a bit on stage about. I think it was in Florida. He said there was so many female teachers having relationships with young teenage boys, 13, 14 year age, and joking about it. And people laughing and clapping, go, yeah, they're heroes, and those guys are so cool, and and I'm thinking, no, and I hear that, and you hear from men like, oh, she's so hot, like, hot teacher, yeah, he's so lucky.
It's a relationship of trust where you're in loco parentis. Exactly. You're in the place.
Exactly, but put it the other way around.
Oh yeah,
a male teacher and a young female student. The people would want him strung up by his testicles.
Oh, completely.
They would. And I mean, just you reminded me of that, and I think it's just so painful to see it. So I honestly, thank you for bringing it up. I didn't look at the Andy Carroll situation from that point of view. Thank you for bringing it up, because that was bothering me when we hear like, oh, like it's great, like these, and they joke about it. Saturday Night Live had a great, it was funny, but you look at it kind of going, yeah, but that's not funny. And I think it was Ronda Rousey was in a sketch of Saturday Night Live, the TV show, the NBC TV show, where, she was this, I think she was a teacher who was having an affair with a boy and so on. And people were laughing and saying, this is very funny, where it's child abuse. And this is abuse. No. Okay, we'll move on. Talk about being strung up by the testes. Caster Semenya this past week said that she would show her vagina to show that she is female, because as we know, we actually discussed it on the radio and people really got sick with it. She has undescended testes, so she actually is I can't use, it's not transsexual. What is it? It's intersex.
Yeah. So it's DSD. So basically she falls in between the two is the best way of describing it. If like externally she may look female, unfortunately internally and genetically it's just a different situation.
And this whole thing is because she is producing testosterone, and of course, she has said, no, she identifies as female. She got married to her female partner, but she has an excessive testosterone, and that's something that that they had tried to suppress. Of course, she said that when this first came up, when she was younger, quite a few years ago, now she's 31 years of age. She said that she would show, like do the naked search or naked exposes her to show that she is a woman, because again, as I said, like she has the internal testes, which produces testosterone, which makes her, it's called hyperandrogenism. So basically, she has more muscle and strength than other women. This isn't a case, like we discussed before, of a transsexual swimmer. This is very.
She's intersex. This isn't a choice to identify as either a gender. She literally, externally, she was raised as a girl, because for all intents and purposes, when she was born, that is how it would have been the case for the doctor, midwife, whoever was there, her mother, her father. That's how they would have identified, by what we consider the standard identification. So when you're going by genitalia, they went, this is a girl. And her being intersex or DSD has obviously, it puts, she's in a very difficult position. We do see a number of DSD athletes, possibly because they excel so well at sport, that it's seen more commonly in the higher echelons of sport because of the genetic advantages they have, which are, again, outside their control. But I think Caster in particular, I just have a huge amount of sympathy for how she seems to have been the chosen athlete for the international athletics to go after, in terms of how they have applied their regulations to make sure she can't compete. And they have decided she is the prime example of this, as opposed to others. There have been obviously Dushi Chan and a few other athletes who have had high profile cases with Cass, but it seems a campaign against Caster to an extent.
Now, we will, in a couple of weeks' time, we'll have a discussion with a couple of transsexual athletes, people who transition to be female. And from discussions with them and having interviewed a couple in the past, they would say, same as Caster Semenya, she had to take suppressing hormones. And she described it like that. She's been stabbed with a knife. It's very difficult. And having, interviewed one person who transitioned from female to male, or sorry, from male to female, that everything is affected, like bone density, different illnesses, the immune system. And as she said that, it was something she came to quite well later in life, but it was worth it. But with Caster, I mean, she's still seen as other, but yet I mean, we know, for example, from rugby, from the Pacific, from Samoa, that where there are these intersex people, they're males, Fafuin, I think it's called, where they actually identify as women, and it's very hard to understand, are they male, are they female, or what are
they? I think the big issue here, though, is where we have, and I suppose in sport we recognize a naturally occurring advantage that people have. And the difficulty is, if we're asking athletes like Caster to take hormone suppressants, it's not the same as asking someone who is choosing to transition. We're asking someone who, through no fault of their own, has a genetic advantage, arguably, probably in other aspects of their life they don't feel it's an advantage, to suppress so they can compete in sport. And I think it just becomes, it's a bit more of a complicated one, because when the likes of the intersex athletes start competing in sport, for the vast majority, they are unlikely to be aware of the advantage they have or why they have that advantage. And that's where it becomes a minefield. Like, it's just so difficult to figure out what the appropriate action is, because for a trans athlete, they're aware. There's an awareness. They're going, I was born male or female and I'm transitioning to either gender. There's an awareness there. And for the likes of Caster, I think when visually everything appears externally to suggest, no, she's just an exceptionally talented woman, and she still is an exceptionally talented woman, but she has that other complexity in terms of being a DSD athlete. It's very difficult. It's ethically, morally, everything that sports have to do to look into this. I think to me, it's much more complicated a question than trans athletes, and I think it's very difficult to know. Like, trans athletes obviously are going to feel they're in the same category, but it's so much more complicated, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's, as you mentioned, the Indian athlete. I mean, that again, it's a huge question. Of course, we're not going to solve it tonight, but I do want to bring on. We're not going to do the big quiz today because we're running over time because we started late. Sporting hot topics. What have you got? You've got two. Brilliant, because you're on your own. So far away.
I actually just want to talk about this is going to be a strange one because we don't really ever touch on the subject of horse racing, and I do want to touch on it tonight because probably one of the biggest names, and it may not be a sport that everyone is familiar with, but a lot of people would know about Lester Piggott, and he's considered one of the greats, one of the greatest jockeys probably of the modern era.
Just one second, your video has gone. Just so
sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. So yes, it went dark. So yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. Okay. So Lester Piggott. Yeah. I won't give away what happened, but anyway.
Sorry. So Lester would be considered one of the greats in terms of modern jockeys. Probably Frankie Dettori is the name most globally known on the same level. But Lester Piggott was always called the Longfellow, which in Ireland would have references to a different historical figure. But because he was 5'8", which in terms of a jockey is tall, it's a big jockey.
For flat race jockey as well, is very tall.
Incredibly tall. Like, it's the sort of level where probably most stables would have gone, what are you thinking? But he is also obviously with Vincent O'Brien's stable. He's synonymous with all the biggest stables. Nijinsky probably being the most famous horse, I would argue, that was well known and associated with him. But his death has brought an outpouring of just really nice tributes across the racing industry. He was also a man who wasn't without his flaws, receiving a 3-year sentence for tax evasion. I think the sum was £3 million at the time. That was the subject of his tax evasion. He also had an OBE revoked, which in my mind gives him even greater gravitas. But he is a man. I think that the thing about Lester Piggott is he started off in an era, and we discussed this actually earlier at home. He started off in an era where people would you would be watching the racing or reading about the racing, but you didn't have, like, it's not social media, it's not easy accessibility. And he was a man who was involved in some of the biggest races for, I think, when I looked at it earlier, maybe 8 years in a row he was champion jockey. Now, he had other people competing at his heels, but he went through such an era as a champion jockey. And then even after he ostensibly retired or went off the bigger scenes, he was still racing in Ireland at smaller settings. His daughter would be very well known in Irish racing, Tracy Piggott, who would have gone on to have a very big career particularly in recent years, in commentary. And I just think sometimes we are so quick to look at modern players because they're in different sports, because they're so easily accessible. They're so all over our screens, our tablets, our TVs. And this is a man who was a great of sport at a time when the way people knew you was from the level of your achievement. And we don't get the likes of those people anymore. We know the likes of Conor McGregor, we now know from his time with Kylie Minogue. But I think we don't get sports who's just based on their achievements, and his achievements, if you have 5 minutes, go and look at the list. It's just absolutely incredible. And we won't, as they say here a lot, see those likes again.
No, and just before you go into the second one, of course, 4,493 wins, 9 Epsom derbies, and what I always thought was brilliant when he would be sitting in the day of the race, and go to a race meeting, and he'd be sitting in a sauna, boiling himself down, and in order to sort of keep himself alive, he would enjoy, and this would say, he would enjoy a cigarette and a glass of champagne so that his weight would not go up. So that's just, unbelievable jockey. I think he was very hard done by. And being stripped of the OBE, when you see some of the people who have OBE or kind of honors from the royalty, including Peter Prince Andrew, Yeah, he did very, very well. He said, "You're gone again." Actually, by the way, your
Okay.
video. Yeah, I think it's slowing. So your second talking point, your hot topic.
My second talking point, we've actually gone over it already. My second talking point was going to be the win for La Rochelle, or as they're known here, La Rogel, because we like to emphasize the fact that Raj is in charge. So what I was going to talk about is the enormous effect that will have on rugby in general, just the talking point of it. But as we have already covered that, perhaps that's one to divert off to another time. But it's my most, I think the thing we think about so much is we're so focused on the big names and the big teams and the money they pour in. Obviously in Ireland there isn't a salary cap per se. So in France, people don't realize how much the French rugby teams, despite all their money, are actually hamstrung by various rules. So the GIF rule, where they have to have a certain number of French players in their team. They also have to bring up a certain number of players through their academies. So while we might see big names going to France and playing out there at the end of their career, so huge international names go there, there's still a lot of contributing factors. They actually receive in their own domestic league points deductions if they don't play the required GIF number of players throughout the tournaments. In Ireland, the vast majority of players are centrally contracted, which effectively means that there is no salary cap like there is in the UK or France, save for the fact that you're constrained by what your national budget can do. And I think the magnitude of a team which are also not in the, like La Rochelle are not at Toulouse, they're not at Toulon, they're not at that level, or at Claremont in terms of their financial investment and the history in terms of their academy. So their achievement and the magnitude of it is absolutely huge. It's also a really good thing for, I suppose, the non-Red Bulls, the non-Man Cities, the non-top of the money tree tables, and to come out and do what they did, the magnitude of it is a resounding positive for sport and just good coaching, good player management, and just good luck.
Yeah, it all has come together. Last year they were very lucky losing both the top 14 and the European final, but they came good in the end. So no, I'm with that. The one thing I would say for the Irish, the Irish provinces, for example, Connacht are also hamstrung because they, the big teams like Munster and Leinster will always get like the cream of the crop. But again, I do think like the central contracts has worked very, very well for Ireland. But at the same time, I think that the way the system is set up in France, I think is very, very good. And we've seen it, of course, with the Six Nations this year when they won the Grand Slam. The quality of young players coming through in France is unbelievably good. And I do think that they are, even though the English, Eddie Jones thinks that they're going to win the next World Cup in France, I don't think so. I think it's actually France should get their first World Cup win on their home soil. It would be very, very beautiful.
And hopefully with better security in place than they had.
Yes, for sure they need it. Isol, Cody, thank you very much for today. We held the show on our own. We flew through it. So we'll be back next week. No big 50 quiz, but we'll be back next week. And of course, he is tied up with he's on duty on the desk, on the news desk, and Andrew Flint just simply couldn't get on, but we'll get on back next week. Peter P as well will be back with us as well. So Isol, thank you very much. Have a great week.
Thank you very much. Have a great week.
Okay, so with that, folks, we are going to go away into the good night. Wish you all a very, very good week. Of course, the clips will put up for this as well. So, like, share, and comment as well. That's very important. So, until next week, take care of yourselves and each other.